broken, Canada's broken, and Canada's broken because we're stupid. Okay, Canada's broken because we're stupid.
I think it is extraordinary that Mark Carney has become the Prime Minister of Canada. He did a terrible job in Britain.
What's up, folks? Aaron here, Canadian Looney. Guess what's going to happen in this video? CBC is going to break a story that's not in favor of Mark Carney. Pants on fire for you, Mark Carney. Very deceptive, very dishonest. Wow, it was a surprise to me that CBC aired this, but they did, and they actually do a pretty good job. Not a fan of David Cochrane. Good job on this one. It was fair journalism, it seemed to me. Anyhow, let's take a peek. It's interesting. Let's go. Big story.
Hey, that's something everyone can enjoy.
Well, after saying last month it would remove all counter tariffs on U.S. goods covered under CUSMA, new reporting from the CBC has found out that the Liberal government quietly dropped more of those tariffs than advertised. The CBC's Kate McKenna broke the story, and she joins me now. So, Kate, walk us through what you found out here.
Well, David, we all remember last month when Mark Carney announced that the government was going to be dropping some retaliatory tariffs in order to kind of push ahead with trade negotiations with the United States. So at the time, the Prime Minister said that he was essentially going to be matching what the United States was doing to us, which is to say counter tariffs were going to be dropped on CUSMA compliant goods.
Right.
So goods that were compliant with the existing free trade agreement. Implying that if a good wasn't compliant with CUSMA, then it would be tariffed. Take a listen to what he said at the time.
The Canadian government will now match the United States by removing all of Canada's tariffs on U.S. goods specifically covered under CUSMA.
Now, almost a month later, we've learned that's actually not what happened. Canada has removed all counter tariffs, regardless of whether a good was CUSMA compliant, except for, of course, the sectoral tariffs on steel, aluminum, and auto. And they never actually communicated that to the public. We found it by reading an order in council, which was never publicized and required me to ask a number of questions from the government. So this was not something that they ever told the public. Now, there might be good reasons for why the government did it. I spoke with a couple of trade lawyers who told me that it would have been extremely costly to enforce. It would have required hiring more people at the border. The amount of money, that revenue that was generated probably would have been almost negligible because most goods, if you do the paperwork, are CUSMA compliant, right? So one trade lawyer I spoke with said that, this was admirable bureaucratic restraint. However, it's not what the government said that they were doing. It's not what Mark Carney said he was going to do. And the reality of it is they implied that Canada and the U.S. were doing the same things to each other, and in reality, that's not actually what happened. So we heard from Pierre Poilievre today. He posted on social media saying this is another elbows down lie. Now, in a statement, the finance minister's office says they do what they do because they want to adapt their trade policy, both to get a new deal done and also to help Canadians the best that they can.
Right. That was the argument, though, for dropping the CUSMA compliant tariffs. There's been no broader explanation on the balance there, right? Because he says matching, but it's 25% on steel and aluminum versus 50%. But the explanation for why they dropped the non-CUSMA compliant goods from tariffs is just to advance trade. Am I understanding that right?
Yeah, that's absolutely right. They told me they told me that it's true what we're reporting, but they didn't go into detail as to why in their response to me.
Okay. All right. Kate McKenna, the CBC's Kate McKenna with that exclusive reporting. Thanks so much.
You're welcome.
All right. Well, the Power Panel joins me now to talk about all of this. Shachi Kurl is the president of the Angus Reid Institute. Rachel Siegel is a former director of policy in the Stephen Harper government. Andrew Thompson is a former Saskatchewan NDP cabinet minister. And here with me in the studio, Michelle Cadario, who was the deputy chief of staff to former Prime Minister Paul Martin. Andrew, as a former finance minister, let's start with you. What do you make of this move? Because this is not matching. This is different. What do you make of the fact that we found out from Kate McKenna and not from Mark Carney?
Yeah, well, this is pretty good investigative reporting and exactly the kind of thing that finance ministers hate. So
you speak from experience.
Yes, good word, Kate.
Yeah.
It does, I think, beg the question why the government wasn't more transparent about this. It's not like it wasn't going to get found out. It's not like it's not even, I mean, it's defensible. So why not just put forward the argument at the time? These are the kind of things that erode the trust in government over time and I think are really unnecessary. But it does speak to a little bit of the problem that the government has, and frankly, the opposition, in defining exactly where this tariff thing is going to go. I mean, how much are Canadians prepared to actually sacrifice on the price of groceries or other goods to have these so-called elbows up, which I think is kind of getting to be a tired and trite commentary. But, to what extent are they prepared to accept that pain, and to what extent do they want just a more pragmatic path, which is let's find a way to, get over this?
Rachel, I wonder about this because, as Andrew says, maybe there is a defensible reason for this. Like, if it costs more to administer than you're going to collect and it's going to hurt Canadians, then what is the point? But here now they've got a situation where Pierre Poilievre is quoting his favorite news source, the CBC, and accusing them of a lie. What do you make of the way this is going?
Well, I think that the bigger problem for why they didn't talk about this is just the history behind it. I mean, Mark Carney a few months ago came out and told Canadians that his ballot question was, who's going to be better to go after Donald Trump and make the best deal for Canada? What he has done ever since then is taken a sharp turn on almost everything that he has done in relation to those tariffs. And you have to remember, this is a guy that said Donald Trump wants to break us so that he can own us. Like, we were talking about Canada being the 51st state, and now we're seeing that the Prime Minister isn't even telling Canadians when he's making big adjustments to the tariffs. So it's a problem when it comes to trust amongst Canadians, and it's a problem, like he said, when we think about what the outcome will be and whether or not we will actually get a good deal for Canada.
Right, but things haven't been static since the election, right? It was Donald Trump who was talking about Canada being the 51st state, right? And so like that has gone away as an issue. But Michelle, I just wonder from a basic communications and transparency perspective, I mean, the Prime Minister was clear, we're matching. This is going beyond that. Like, if there's a good reason for it, just say it instead of this, right?
I don't understand. It's an own goal, really. There is a justifiable reason, because we all know tariffs. Canadians actually pay the tariffs that we're imposing on duties coming in, and if you want to lower costs, taking some of those tariffs off is the way to do that. I don't. It's curious that Pierre Poilievre wants to have higher costs and keep the tariffs, but fine enough, he can have his own.
But why wouldn't Carney tell people that's what he's doing? That's the real issue here, right?
Own position. And this is a prolonged discussion in terms of where we're going on the trade situation. I think Canadians completely understand that dealing with Donald Trump and getting any deal is not worth it. That we want to have a good deal and one in favor of Canada. And I think along the way, the government is reducing the small number of tariffs as they probably should. That doesn't take away from the fact that they should have been upfront about it. There was no reason not to. And I don't know if it was just sloppiness or laziness or anything like that, or it just got missed. But, I think that this is a lesson that, is probably not that detrimental politically, but they've got to learn and do it better and just be transparent.
Right. Yeah, and for people at home who don't know what orders in council are, these are decisions made by the cabinet. They do get published. So this was published on a government website, but Shachi, not publicized, to build on Kate's point, like trade policy announcements typically are when it's something like this. Look, I know the election was about sovereignty and trade sort of coupled together. The sovereignty thing has dropped off. The trade issue is still front and center. This adaptation, evolution in positions. I mean, what's the appetite for Canadians on this? I mean, Rachel is very critical of this. He says a flip-flop. What's your assessment of where the public is on something like this?
Well, I think, first of all, in politics, as we all know, sometimes transparency, how much transparency to provide and when is Hobson's choice. You either take it on the chin now or you take it on the chin later. In this case, with today's revelations and Kate's really fine reporting, it looks like the Carney government is going to take it on the chin twice for reasons I think they were hoping to avoid, but are not going to avoid. We know why, if there was a motivation to do this on purpose, to whisper the other part quietly instead of say it out loud. It had to do with the fact that we've already started to see confidence and approval in Mark Carney himself as Prime Minister start to slide. That happened right after those retaliatory tariffs, and now all the tariffs were dropped, now we know. We've seen a 2-point lead now for the Conservatives holding. Now, in parlance, that is a statistical tie, but emotionally, morally, the Conservatives will take that. The Liberals don't want to see that. And in terms of confidence in getting a deal done, that has also really started to decline. All of that's happened since August when those retaliatory tariffs were dropped. There is an argument to say, look, we should have said everything out loud at the time, take the hit. But if there is, and I presume there is, a greater strategy here around dropping those tariffs, the why, like why are you doing it, then there is an absolute gap in explaining the why behind it to Canadians. At this stage, they haven't abandoned the Prime Minister or this government yet in terms of strategy. But they're starting to say, this doesn't really meet up with what we heard you say. What he needs to do, as he did with setting the table on zero tariffs, for example, he made the case over the summer to say there may be a world where there's always going to be tariffs. He can also make the choice to come out and say, look, the reason I'm doing this is X and Y. It makes sense. There's a strategy. I'm dropping tariffs like a fox. And bear with me on this. We haven't heard that part.
Yeah, well, I mean, Andrew, there was sort of a rather in-depth explanation on the day he announced that they were moving away to match, the CUSMA compliance with the United States. It was apparently an irritant with the U.S. administration in their conversations. Like you, I think describing trade and geopolitical diplomacy in the elbow posture is I think that changed after the Oval Office meeting and a bunch of other things. Is this, do you think, a right move by the government? Or is this just a communications snafu? I mean, what do you make of this more broadly in terms of an approach to dealing with the U.S.? Because everybody in the world is dealing with tariffs, and nobody seems to have found the secret sauce to getting Donald Trump to change his mind. Well, that is certainly working to the Prime Minister's favor. I think the other thing that we should recognize about Mark Carney is that there's two things that really do work, he's able to take advantage of. One is that people do believe he's going to find a pragmatic way forward. I don't think that they view him to be, dogmatic or ideological overly. And so there is a sense of kind of trust that what he is doing, there's kind of a method to the madness in this. There is a route forward. Second piece is that he has been pretty good at reading the room since he's become Prime Minister, both on the domestic politics and also in terms of understanding how to stay in front of some of the badder economic news. And I think that this is also working to his advantage. So, we're going to have to watch how this plays out. It's interesting that I think neither the Conservatives nor the opposition bloc and NDP have really managed to find a way to turn this into a political advantage for them. Canadians, I think, may be waiting for more information from the Prime Minister on what he's doing, but I think at this point, are prepared to give him the benefit of the doubt. Rachel, your thoughts?
Yeah, I absolutely agree. I think Canadians have given him the benefit of the doubt, and we've talked about that for months now. The question is, at what point does that trust degrade? And it's moments like this and reporting like Kate's that degrades that trust. And whether or not that was a communications snafu or it really was planned, that they changed it on purpose and decided not to make a public statement about it, eventually Canadians will wonder, where are we going and how are we getting this done? And this isn't about necessarily just the relationship with the United States or Donald Trump as the president. This is about the Canadian economy. This is about Canadian workers and Canadian businesses and people that are living their lives with this ambiguity. And now to have the Prime Minister, the leader of our nation, not even telling Canadians what they are doing and being clear on potentially economic issues. We've seen Mark Carney say in his platform that he was anticipating $20 billion in revenue from tariffs that potentially we couldn't see now. I think that's where this moment happens with Canadians, where they start to wonder, what exactly is happening and where exactly are we going.
Yeah, the $20 billion in revenue would have been a $20 billion tax on Canadians, right? Like,
Exactly.
Like Trump is bragging about the revenue, and it's a tax on Americans. And it was interesting. Kate spoke to trade lawyers, Michelle, who gave a good explanation. We shouldn't have to go to a third party to get that explanation. You know what I mean? But what do you make of just sort of that analysis there? That this is a less than honest move by the government.
Well, so I would say two things. We have to remember that there's not that much in our trade relationship that's actually was tariffed at all, right? It is still 85% free trade between our two countries. And taking off the CUSMA ones made a lot of sense. There remains huge issues in certain industries and just crippling in so many cases. And I'm not sure that Canadians are caring so much about which tariff is here and there and what they disclosed in it and how it came out. They care about how much they're spending. They care about the price of the groceries. And they also do care, though, that we're on the right path. And what I will say is, I think that the Prime Minister is likely really, he's obviously they're trying to negotiate with the President. I think there's appreciation that anybody who's watched this TV and knows anything about Donald Trump knows that that would be a difficult conversation and almost impossible to try and pin him down to get a good deal. Nobody's walking away with a good deal. But, at the same time, Canadians do want to hear more from the Prime Minister about the why, they want an update. And, that's not something that he can probably talk about completely openly, right, when you're in the middle of negotiations. And so it's a tough position. That's why you are Prime Minister, and that's one of the things that you have to kind of balance. At some point, though, and I don't think that it's too long down the road, perhaps it's around the budget, they are going to have to say more about the direction that they're going, and be able to bring Canadians along if they want to kind of keep that trust from eroding.
Yeah, Shachi, last word to you, and then we got to take a break.
Yeah, I would just echo what's already been said around the erosion of trust. I mean, so what has happened effectively is the Carney government and his party has opened itself up to more criticism from Pierre Poilievre on this issue. His interpretation, the opposition's interpretation of it, will be the interpretation that wins the day, at least in the short term, at least in the short news cycle. And it's just one of those gifts that you give to the opposition when you really shouldn't.
All right, gang, how about that? David Cochrane and the CBC panel did pretty good. That young lady busted out a big story. Anyhow, what's going to happen next? What's going on with the legacy media? A couple of times this week, they've done journalism. It's great to see. I'll give them credit when it's journalism. I'm Aaron, Canadian Looney. Like, share, subscribe. We cover Canadian federal politics, which everybody has an opinion about. Get yours right here. Like, share, subscribe. Thank you for watching the video. We'll catch you in the next one.